So these generalized roles are going to be what we are going to use in our argument structure templates. And one part of the argument structure template is going to be a subcategorization frame. So the template we're going to use to show these syntactic positions is this subcategorization frame. This will show us what the syntactic arguments are, what order occur in, and whether or not we've got some necessary or optional prepositional phrases in the event structure. So an example of making a subcategorization frame for hit is one where we look at the various distributions of this verb and its arguments and determine what semantic roles, our generalized roles from above, match up with which syntactic positions with respect to the verb, and then whether they're required or optional. So optional is going to be indicated by parentheses. So we abstract away from the first instantiation of hit here and give it a basic syntax template. So we say hit, it's a verb. There must be a subject. Then comes the verb, so we mark this with a space underscored. There must also be a direct object of hit. And here we have an optional prepositional phrase. So we do this by showing the preposition and then an NP3. So in linking theory, we have the idea that our theory can tell us how to predictably link syntactic with semantic roles. So we have certain generalizations we've made based on these proto roles, which will tell us whether or not a certain argument will occur in the subject position or the object position, or perhaps if it has a certain particular combination of these, it'll be a bit less predictable. So in an active sentence, we say that there's a competition for taking the subject position between the arguments of a verb. If there's an agent, and it's the clear agent, it will be the subject usually. If there's a cause and a unique cause, and there's no other agent in there, then it'll also be the subject usually. If there's a single semantic argument and no agent, it will also be the subject. So semantic argument has a lot of proto-agent properties. It's more likely to be the subject. And if it has more proto-patient properties, then it's more likely to take the object position. So these are these proto-agent and proto-patient properties that we see here. These proto-roles that we see on the right are also what we might consider the building blocks of the generalized roles which are above. So an agent is going to be usually a cause and intentional. So we've already seen that agents are a combination of these two. Sometimes they're active and they're probably sentient. So these are groups of properties to be viewed as a sort of checklist, which explains some important generalizations that we see in linking theory. These proto-roles that we see here are such that they show us good properties of subjects and good properties of objects. But essentially, we're going to have some sort of like a race. there will be competition between the various arguments of a predicate or a verb in order to get the subject position. So if one argument regularly needs to cause eventuality and be intentional and active and sentient in a certain event, then you're going to have that argument predictably and regularly come into the subject position. Whereas if there's a second argument which doesn't have as many of these and has more proto-patient properties, or perhaps in some cases just has significantly less proto-agent properties, then that's going to be in the direct object position. So these are going to be considered stable verbs when there's one argument with many proto-agent properties in the event, and then there's another argument in the event where it has many proto-patient properties. So these kinds of situations where the event's participants are clearly delineated between one having more proto-agent properties and one having more proto-patient properties are going to be considered stable verbs. These are events where cross-linguistically these predicates have their arguments linked in the same way. So we can see an example of this. Here we've got the truck hit the tree. So first we can do the argument structure, where we have hit, verb, and let's do a naive NP1, a space for the verb, and then NP2. So this is going to be our argument structure in this event. So now we can look at the hitter and hittee, which we'll show over here. And see how they line up. So in any hitting event, you're going to have the hitter somehow causing the event a bit more than the hittee would. And the hitter is not necessarily intentional, so we don't have to worry about this one. Neither is the hittee, as we can see from the truck hit the tree. The hitter is also going to be, it seems, somehow more active. We can debate about this, but I'm not going to. And the hitter can also be sentient, but doesn't have to, so I'm putting a no there. So we've already got a clear divide. The hitter has 2 proto-agent properties, and the hittee has none. The hitter is not affected, but the hittee is somehow affected. It's been hit. The hitter doesn't have to be intentional, and it doesn't have to be non-intentional. It's not necessarily stationary. In fact, it's crucially not stationary. And although, yeah, it could be sentient, and it could be non-sentient. It's not necessarily non-sentient. So we say no. Its existence is also not caused by this event, but neither is the hittee's. So then we look at the hittee's properties, and the tree in this situation in sentence 2 is non-intentional. I'm not sure it has to be, but in any case, it is a bit more stationary, but perhaps doesn't need to be. And it doesn't have to be non-sentient. So these are the distributions. And it looks as though the hitter clearly has the cause and active proto-agent properties, while the hittee will have none of them. And the proto-patient properties are completely missing from the hitter, and yet it looks like there could be a few on the hittee. So we say that hit is a stable predicate because its arguments, or sorry, its participants are always going to be in a certain distribution, which is to say we have here a cause, going back to our generalized rules. So a non-intentional cause. And then we have a patient or theme rule. So we can also confound this a bit by looking at another sentence. And we can also formulate this in another way. So we can say hit is a predicate, and it has two participants in this naive way that we've shown above. And one of those participants is a cause, and the other is a patient or a theme.